Good morning, everybody. My name's Jason Fox. I'm the technical evangelist at the FIWARE Foundation, and usually at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, I will be running one of our so-called FIWARE Wednesday webinars, where we describe what's new in FIWARE, how to use FIWARE, and generally talk about the technical side of things. Well, this week we are doing something a bit different because this is not a standard Wednesday webinar. This is a project which FIWARE is supporting called SmartAgriHubs, which is a pan-European project, where what FIWARE wants to do is to tap into our network of users, our network of developers, our network of iHubs, our network of all these different organizations worldwide, basically, so that we can strengthen digital agriculture and support each other. And there's also an additional change here, because this project has been adapted because of the current COVID situation. I'm sure all of you are watching at home at the moment. I had to dash in to pick up a second screen so I could continue doing my presentations 2 months ago, and I've not been in the office since then. So the idea here is to increase cooperation between various entities across Europe. So let's see what the project is all about. The basic idea behind this presentation will be as follows. We'll have a very brief introduction to what SmartAgriHubs actually is, and then cover the various open calls, which include a particularly special one for COVID-19, which is very, very short term, very time limited, which is why we're doing this presentation right now, to get people aware of it right now, so that we can actually get things before the deadline. The deadline, I think, on slide 5 is June. And then we'll also discuss what happens next, because obviously everything's a little bit different this summer. So if you're not able to react within the first 3 weeks, what other opportunities have you got? And then also, where should you be asking your questions? I am not the project coordinator or anything for SmartAgriHubs. As I said, FIWARE is a partner within the SmartAgriHubs organization, which has got, I think, well, we'll see the next slide with the numbers, hundreds of organizations involved. So everything I say should be taken as this is my current understanding. And if you want to get the real legal viewpoint, then there is a place to go to get the real answers for any questions. So what is SmartAgriHubs? SmartAgriHubs is an ecosystem across Europe, which is connecting the dots. The idea is that you have these things called digital innovation hubs. There we go. So what are the elements to SmartAgriHubs? Well, the key part of SmartAgriHubs are so-called digital innovation hubs. Digital innovation hubs are your local regional support organization, which is there to try and make your development process easier. And obviously, they are the go-to organization for your local farm or your local farm organization. And the important thing about a digital innovation hub is that they must have a dissemination function, and they will be your local expert. However, there is another aspect here, which is your so-called competence center, where there could be some other entity who is an expert in X. You could be an expert in FIWARE. You could be be interested in interoperability, and they would be the advisor who would know more than the generalist. Now, obviously, there is a massive overlap between competence centers and digital innovation hubs, because most organizations don't do one thing or the other. Now, the idea here is such that you might have, I don't know, let's say a competent centre in robotics in Portugal who actually knows how to automate picking. They could be contacted by, say, a digital innovation hub in, say, Greece, who have a similar problem. But obviously, the problem here is that agriculture is very heterogeneous. So if you want to, you need to understand both the local conditions and the expertise in order to be able to get something useful. So the SmartAgriHubs have got a series of flagship innovation experiments where there is, I say, things like this cross-border collaboration, such that you can get information coming across the board. You're strengthening your networks, and you are, in general, getting people to understand where things are coming from. Let's move on to the open call and how it works for you. Now, the main target for majority of these open calls is these digital innovation hubs, these regional one-stop shops, and the DIHs need support in order to kick off innovation experiments, which is where your SMEs and what have you would come in. And it's a matter of obviously spreading the risk by providing cash as necessary, or supplementing cash is probably a better way of doing it, so that both the Digital Innovation Hub itself and the organisation which is doing the experiment, the innovation experiment, can actually proceed without too much risk. Now, there are obviously limits to the amount of cash and how you go into doing this. So you can't ask for too much, but you can ask for multiple experiments if necessary. Current situation, somewhat different. There is a need to do stuff about COVID, obviously. I think it's not going to be a surprise that virtually every project you've come across will have been changing to try and mitigate the effects of COVID. So therefore, there is an additional split in the way that this project is running, and there is going to be a special short-term COVID situation so that we can expand the open call differently. It's best summed up in the following slide, where there will be three separate phases to this. Respond, which is the main thing we'll be talking about today, restart and expand. Now, the respond, as I said, is a short-term project which is very lightweight to try and apply for, involves both digital innovation hubs and SMEs. I'll come to the details later, to try and do a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, we hope that this will be dying down over time, and therefore the results need to be shown over the next 6 months or so. Thereafterwards, there needs to be additional projects which would be medium term to restart the system, trying to get the economy back on its legs, and obviously trying to expand this network. There are two parts to the respond call. There's a respond, usually described as respond to. There's a respond to COVID-19 for DIHs, which covers things like running hackathon activities to try and get some sort of response right now, something useful out right now. And there are more details in later slides as to what sort of activities would be covered. And depending on the type of DIH, whether you are a not-for-profit or whatever, you can ask for up to 100% of budget. The details are in the fiche. But there's also an opportunity to do a pitch presentation for SMEs. So you can say, okay, we've got this idea. We need X to do Y. and this will help COVID because of Z. And therefore, that can also be funded to a certain extent, up to 70%. The important thing to remember about the respond calls is that, and this is in the full details, is that the work must be implemented. You should need to see what's happened early December or earlier, even better, so that this is short term. But if you've got ideas which are longer term than this, then that's not a problem. We can also there's also the main funding which will go on beyond this short period. There's a fixed deadline. The call opened yesterday, which is why we're having this presentation today. There will be another webinar by the actual proper authorities of SmartAgriHubs next week, which will be covering Q&A. But the whole call will shut at 5 o'clock on the 3rd of June. So you've got just under 3 weeks to get your stuff out, and obviously there is then a period of assessment before it actually kicks off, and he said it must be finished by the end of the year. Thereafter, there will be the additional open calls, which will be more formal. This the idea behind Respond is that it's very lightweight. Do it right now, but there will be a more formal procedure for how to do your activities, how to expand your network if you're going for the more general, less speed call. And obviously the criterion for how much you can money you can ask will be different depending on the various elements. So the main call, Restart and Expand, will be a continuous submission call. So there will be opportunity to put your batch in to say, I want to do this. They will be evaluated in groups. Some will be selected, some will be dropped, and this will continue on until either the money has run out or the last batch has been evaluated before the end of the project. Once again, there is this distribution of funding required. Examples of the sort of thing which could be of use. There's a list of useful things up on screen. I'm sure you're all aware of the agricultural situation in your own country. Here in Germany, for example, there's been issues on trying to get in the asparagus harvest, particularly if you can't get migrant workers in to actually deal with things. And indeed, there's been COVID-related hotspots in slaughterhouses, and therefore you would need opportunities to look at how you could help out there would also be of use. The full details, it covers a wide range of things as you would expect, and what you need to do with food and how you get hold of and how you get it through the system. So, what do you need to do? Well, you need to read the relevant template. The link is on screen at the moment, which says how to fill in the form and send a PDF if you are a digital innovation hub. You send what the information is, and it's structured. It's about 10 pages long, and then contacted, and there will be a beauty contest thereafter. The link to where you send it is the same for both parts of this respond call. The mechanism for applying in the main call will be done through the SmartAgriHubs portal rather than just sending emails. This is the only one which is for sending emails. The email address is for the proposals only. It is not for general questions, and I'll explain how questions and answers will work later on. So what do you need to send? Well, for the format, you need to send a short description, what it is, why, obviously, and why it should be supported. It's fairly obvious. It's again 8 bullet points. Justify why you should get the money. Basically, why do you need it, and what do you want it for? This can then be assessed and then compared against other opportunities. Again, this shouldn't be particularly strange news for innovation hubs, because they already exist for doing these sort of activities, and it's just a matter of saying, right, give us the this money for this proposal because X, Y, Z. There is, of course, the other alternative, which is particularly for SMEs, which is Respond to, and this is slightly different in that you can, instead of just filling out the form, and again, there's a link on screen for which form you need to do. Effectively, you just create a PowerPoint presentation, as you would expect. You know, I'm pitching my product. I need to get X amount of cash to do my product with the various things. So again, this is not going to be particularly long. It's either a PDF or a PowerPoint saying no longer than 8 slides long, and you need to do your declaration saying, yes, I am an SME, yes, we've got less than I think it's 250 employees, and so on top of that. Again, same address for sending your pitch, and it's just sending the pitch for that email for just sending the pitch, not for questions in general. The slide deck is very short. 10 slides, which is just your title, why, what the problem is, why what the business plan is, how long is it going to take, where the lumps of money are going to go, and a short CV of key individuals and the declaration. Again, very quick, get this out. We've got a total of 3 weeks, so it can't be heavy. Now, you're probably going to ask, any questions? As I said, if you want to get the official answers, and I would say that this is much better than asking some random guy like me on the internet, the way to go forward is to talk to the SmartAgriHubs forum on the open call category. Why? Because the team will be dealing also with the legal team to make sure that the answers which are placed onto the forum are watertight and correct. I personally don't want to give you information which is incorrect, because obviously my knowledge across the board and across the EU law is limited. So if you need to find out how much funding am I allowed in if I'm this sort of category of organisation, or am I allowed to put this because I'm competing with X, Y, Z, that is the sort of questions which should go on this forum. As I said, there will be an open Q&A session next week, which will also collect, common questions, make sure that you've got the right ideas. If you look in the on the link above, the open call program itself, there are already a large amount of documentation which describes some of these common scenarios, which obviously, depending on who you are, will be of interest to different organisations. So your first call is to go to that SmartAgriHubs EU portal open call to ensure that you've got the right location. Also, you will get the documentation, the legalese, all the other stuff for getting into this presentation. As I said, this is likely to be a relatively short presentation. So that is the introduction. The idea is to go to the SmartAgriHubs portal and investigate the full details yourself. So I will stop the recording at this point here.